Indo-Pacific partners, Australia, Japan, New Zealand, and the Republic of Korea. We now face an era of strategic competition. We see a deepening strategic partnership between Moscow and Beijing. And China's growing assertiveness and its coercive policies have consequences for the security of allies and our partners. China is substantially building up its military forces, including nuclear weapons, bullying its neighbors and threatening Taiwan. Investing heavily in critical infrastructure, including in allied countries. Monitoring and controlling its own citizens through advanced technology. And spreading Russian lies and disinformation. China is not our adversary, but we must be clear-eyed about the serious challenges it represents. And we must continue to stand with our partners to preserve the rules-based international order. A global system based on norms and values instead of brute violence. So NATO will step up cooperation with our Indo-Pacific partners, including on cyber defense, new technologies, maritime security, climate change, and countering disinformation, because these global challenges demand global solutions. We will also do more with our partners. We approved an enhanced package of support for Ukraine, helping to equip and strengthen the country for the long term. And we agreed to step up political and practical support for other partners at risk from Russian aggression, including Bosnia-Herzegovina, Georgia, and the Republic of Moldova. We will help them to build their capabilities and strengthen their resilience. NATO's partnership with the European Union has already reached unprecedented levels, and we will continue to deepen our cooperation. Tonight, Allied foreign ministers will meet with Jordan and Mauritania, affirming our determination to continue responding to challenges from the south, including the Sahel. For the first time, allies have today agreed a defense capacity building package for Mauritania. We will help them deal with security concerns, including border security, irregular migration, and terrorism. Based on Mauritania's request, we will focus our support in a number of key areas, including special operations, maritime security, and intelligence. The challenges of today are too great for any nation or organization to face alone. But by standing together with our partners, we are stronger and safer. We can better protect our people, our values, and our way of life. And with that, I'm ready to take your questions.
Okay, we'll start with Financial Times.
Good evening. Thank you, Henry Foy, Financial Times. Thank you, Secretary General. You've had a very long day. I appreciate you taking our questions. I have a question about the 300,000 troops that you spoke about yesterday and on Monday. I've spoken to a number of allied countries here today, large allies that would be assumedly contributing large amounts of troops to that, and they have no idea about their pledges or how on earth you reached that number. Could you tell us a bit today about how you calculated that total and when you were going to provide a national breakdown of which countries are providing how many troops? Thank you.
So what we have agreed now is a new NATO force structure, a new NATO force model. And then we agree the framework, the principles, and then, of course, allies have to contribute forces to that new force model. That is in many ways the same as we've done before when we have made similar decisions. And this will be a combination of forces deployed, especially in the eastern part of the alliance. We have already stepped up with around, or actually more than 40,000 troops under direct NATO command. But then the majority of these forces will be home-based. But what will happen, and they will of course build on forces which exist in NATO countries. But the difference is that they will now be organized in ways that can fit them into NATO operations, fit them into NATO defense planning, and be available for NATO commanders. And we also, of course, increase their readiness. So they will be available. We speak about different tiers. The number 300,000 is the first and the second tier. One part of that is ready within 10 days, and the second part will be ready within 30 days. And together this is over 300,000 troops. We will continue to work on this, and the plan is to have this in place by next year. Of course, it requires, as always when you do things in NATO, that allies contribute the forces they have promised to contribute and to live up to such a decision. But based on what we have done before, I'm confident that this will happen also this time. I remember we made the decision to have battle groups in the Baltic countries, smaller numbers, but a big new step for allies, and allies stepped up and delivered. So this is partly higher readiness, partly to organize forces in informations which makes them available for NATO, and then last but not least, partly about pre-assign them for specific territories. So this is the core of the NATO, or it is for the land element of the NATO new force model and the new force structure.
Okay, we'll go to Imedi.
Thank you, Anna, for the question. Mr. Secretary General, we are very happy that the door of this organization is open, and we are also waiting for the historic decision from NATO to invite Georgia. We are living, as you many times mentioned, in the unpredictable world, but still in the context of open door policy. What message are you sending today from Madrid to Georgia? When window of opportunity will be for Georgia? You met with the Georgian Prime Minister, he had a speech. Can you tell us more about this enhanced support for Georgia? Thank you very much.
I met with the Georgian Prime Minister and we discussed and addressed, of course, how we can, as you asked about, step of our practical and political partnership and support for Georgia. We will step up both the political and practical support for Georgia with a new package to help build their capabilities and also strengthen their resilience, including by increasing Georgia's participation in NATO's cyber exercises, strengthening secure communications, and help develop protection of critical infrastructure. We will also plan to provide additional personnel for our NATO liaison office in Georgia. And then, of course, we have also other elements like the training and evaluation center in Tbilisi, and other elements that can further strengthen our partnership with Georgia. On the membership issue, well, we stand by the decision we have taken before, but we are not going to give any dates. We stand by the decision on membership taken actually back in at the Bucharest summit.
Okay, we'll go to Asahi TV.
Thank you, Secretary General. Adam Pigg at TV Asahi. Firstly, what is the significance of inviting Prime Minister Kishida to a NATO summit now for the first time? And secondly, China has reportedly accused the US of planning to create a similar alliance to NATO in the Asia-Pacific. Have there been any discussions on the creation of any such alliance?
Not at this meeting. What kind of organizations our partners in the Asia-Pacific are ready to engage in, that's not for me to comment on. What I can say is that we appreciate very much the partnership with them. And it's an important thing in itself that they all have been represented for the first time at the NATO summit at the level of heads of state and government. We share the same values, we share many of the same threats, and NATO will remain an alliance of North America and Europe. But this region, North America and Europe, faces global threats and challenges. That's cyber, that's terrorism, but also the security consequences of China, because that has effect on us. And therefore it is important to work together with, for instance, our Asia-Pacific partners. And of course, several allies have also expressed concerns related to freedom of navigation. and China's coercive and assertive behavior in the South China Sea. This matters for the countries in the region, but it matters also for every country concerned about the freedom of navigation and the importance of trade being conducted in a safe and secure way.
Okay, La Vanguardia.
Thank you for the floor. Beatriz Navarro with La Vanguardia. I have two interlinked questions for you, Secretary General. Listening to you and reading the strategic concept, I wonder whether NATO has assumed that we are actually getting into a new Cold War, a second Cold War. And the second question, as I said, what would you say to critics who say that NATO is reinforcing a bloc's mentality which will further divide the world? Thank you very much.
So NATO has strived for a better relationship with Russia for decades. We established the NATO-Russia Council. We agreed the NATO-Russia Founding Act. We invited Russia in to participate in many different activities. And in our current strategic concept agreed in 2010, we actually state that Russia is a strategic partner. It's Russia that has walked away from this attempt to build more trust, more partnership, and work closer together. And they have done that with a pattern of behavior, using military force against Ukraine, moving into using military force against Georgia in 2008, then annexing Crimea in 2014, and using force in eastern Donbass since 2014. The war didn't start in February 2022. The war started in Ukraine in 2014. What we have seen this year is an escalation of a war which has been there for a long time. And that has made it impossible for us to continue to have the kind of partnership engagement with Russia that we have worked for so long. Yes, tensions are, our relationship with Russia is at the lowest level since the end of the Cold War, but there is no doubt that the responsibility for that is Russia. It was a message among all those countries participating today that, of course, we are like-minded countries, NATO allies, the European Union, Georgia, Finland, Sweden, soon to become NATO members, and Asia-Pacific 4 partners. But NATO has to have an open mind and engage with also countries which are not as like-minded as the countries gathered in that room. And therefore, this is not kind of a closed cooperation or partnership. We want to reach out, but at the same time, we cannot be naive when it comes to Russia. They use force. President Putin tries to establish some kind of sphere of influence, controlling what neighbors can do or not do, and then we need to partly provide support to those partners which are under attack from Russia, and at the same time also ensure that there's no risk for any military action against any NATO country by Russia, and that's the reason why we increased the military presence in the east.
Okay. We'll go to the lady over there.
Secretary Ramaraj, the United States Press Agency. This is a momentum, and like you said, this is a historic step for NATO, including Finland and Sweden, in such a fast pace within this complicated conflict in Ukraine. Can we say now that NATO is implementing an effective and fast speed diplomacy, a new way of diplomacy towards international defense and also to serve peace? Thank you.
When the world is changing, NATO has to change, and when things happen fast, we need to react fast. And that's exactly what happened after the invasion on the 24th of February. We have actually prepared for this possibility for a long time. It's not as if NATO suddenly woke up on the 24th of February and realized that Russia was dangerous. This invasion was predicted very precisely by our intelligence services. We shared publicly those intelligence reports back as last fall, and very precisely predicting that Russia was building up and planning to invade Ukraine. So what we predicted happened. Of course, we worked hard to the very end to try to prevent that from happening. We met with Russia, we engaged with Russia, but they continued with their plans and they invaded Ukraine. And the reality is that we have also been preparing for this since 2014, because that's the reason why we have increased our presence in the eastern part of the alliance, why NATO allies have started to invest more in defense, and why we have increased the readiness. And also why we have now for some time worked on a new force structure, which is what we now decide. And then, of course, when allies commit to new force structure, we also expect them to deliver the forces. And the good news is that more and more allies have actually announced forces to fill that new force structure with substance. And now in the coming months, I expect more allies to commit more forces. So when they make decisions, they of course have to also realize that that also will require more forces from NATO allies at high readiness, organized in a way which makes them available for NATO operations, missions, and NATO commanders if needed, and then also to be pre-assigned for specific areas in these. So this is an ongoing adaptation, but what we do now with the new force structure is more fundamental than we have done for many years.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid this concludes this press conference. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much.